Hello and welcome to this webinar on democratization of automation post-pandemic. I'm your host Siddharth Gandhi from HCL, and in today's webinar we will hear Everest's take on automation during and because of the pandemic. We would also hear Microsoft's views on automation technology and the application of those technologies. HCL's report on what's happening on the battleground of automation at their end. And this will be followed by a free-flowing panel discussion. We would also have a round of question and answers towards the end. So thank you very much for joining in. And we have a great panel of speakers today for you. Let's meet our speakers now. I am Siddharth Gandhi, and I have responsibilities for creating deliverable digital transformation solutions at HCL. And I have with me Anil from the Everest Group. Anil, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sid. Hello, everyone. My name is Anil Vijayan. I'm a Global Vice President at Everest Group, where I have oversight on a couple of our research areas, one of which is next generation technologies such as artificial intelligence-based solutions, robotic process automation, process mining, and so on. I also have my colleague Amar here. Amar, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Anil. My name is Amardeep Modi. I'm a practice director with Everest Group and co-lead Everest Group's service optimization technologies research practice, along with Anil. My primary focus areas include RPA, process mining, and intelligent automation. Over to you, Joy.
Everyone, my name is Joy Trujano. I've been with Microsoft for the last 13 years. I'm part of an organization that delivers marketing services at scale for our marketing offices worldwide, serving 14 distinct global areas. My current role is to support field marketing service processes and execution through lots of automation capabilities, tools, and systems. I'm excited and grateful to be invited to today's event, so thank you for having me. Jason.
Joy, my name is Jason Skelton. I'm a Senior Group Marketing Tech Manager within the Global Demand Center in the cloud marketing space at Microsoft. I get the privilege of kind of spearheading our Intelligent Automation Center of Excellence. So that's partnership with Joy and then Ashvini as well, as we think about how we apply Microsoft's first-party tech, specifically around our intelligent automation efforts. We're using that right now, especially within a marketing operations space. So you see a lot of this automation in back office functions. We're trying to do that in a creative space within marketing. And so a lot of really unique opportunity there. With that, I think we have Ash. We'll hand it over to Ash.
Right. So Ash will join us shortly, and we can proceed. He is in the middle of a little bit of a situation, so he'll just be with us shortly, and we can go ahead with Rajat.
Got it.
Sure. Rajat, over to you, please.
I said, I'm excited to be here. So first, thank you for the opportunity. I lead client partnership and growth for strategic DPO customers like Microsoft and others. Me and my team focus on delivering business outcomes for customers through predictive service delivery and enabling automation and AI-based solutions for their charters. So excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And my sincere thanks to all of you, to the panel members. We have a great mix. We will get to hear a lot of different views. And I know the audience is keen to understand your perspectives on what is really happening on the ground from an automation perspective as we are dealing with all of this pandemic-related situations and even otherwise, right? How are we seeing things play out? So Anil, over to you, please. We would love to start with the Everest point of view on what you are seeing in the space, please.
Thank you, Sid, and thank you all for joining in today. It's a pleasure to be speaking with all of you. All right, so the core agenda for today will revolve around automation, how it is evolving, especially in the context of what has happened in the last year and a half or so, and what role a citizen model is expected to play in the near future. Okay, so as we all know, the pandemic that we are living through has also affected the way we do business meaningfully, right? So organizations, for instance, now consider resilience as a key characteristic of a successful future-proof business, whereas earlier it was not as high up the priority list, right? Or maybe it got lost in some of the other priorities. So, in order to examine this in more detail, towards the end of 2020, we at Everest Group conducted a study regarding the means to achieving this resilience in global services. And what we found is that digitization and automation is seen as a key lever to that end. Now, as you can see from the chart, this digitization and automation also affects many of the other levers, such as data availability, for instance, spending levels, and so on. So, in a way, this is a lever that has cross-cutting impact, and hence the need for automation, if anything, has only been accentuated by the pandemic. Okay, so now, apart from the newly important considerations of resilience, automation is being viewed as important to achieving many other objectives. Amongst them, productivity and cost takeout are, of course, viewed as important. In fact, these were the go-to considerations a few years ago when the new generation of automation tools, such as robotic process automation or RPA, chatbots, and so on, were first being implemented. Over course of time, however, things like experience, both on the customer side and the employee side, started to become more and more important. In fact, the pandemic forced some of these up the priority list due to things like lockdowns, remote work impositions, and so on. Situations in which these technologies could play a huge role, not only in automating and bringing about greater efficiency, but also in ensuring smooth experience. Finally, organizations are also increasingly viewing automation as enabling competitive advantage. In fact, there are whole new business models now that are based on automation and the broader umbrella of digital technologies. One example is, of course, things like digital-only banks. So naturally, to progress on this journey, one needs to understand where automation can be leveraged and what role it can play in different business processes. Again, based on our research, we see that enterprises expect automation to be useful across a variety of business functions, with the ability to achieve meaningful cost savings in each and every one of them, regardless of whether these are vertical specific functions such as banking operations or, let's say, insurance claims, or horizontal ones such as finance and accounting, procurement, or HR. So now it is obvious that enterprises want to automate, and since the beginning of the pandemic, they want to accelerate that automation journey considerably. And this is reflected in our projection of the market adoption as well. So while there was certainly some impact in 2020, largely due to transition to work from home and the lockdown situations across the globe, we have seen demand come back and come back with an added urgency. So we predict that the market will actually grow at around 60% year-on-year growth rate for the next couple of years. And keep in mind, this is happening from a significant $3 to $4 billion base as well. So that is a fairly substantial growth. Okay, so now that we understand that there is room for substantial growth, let's look at some of the challenges that are in play today. So enterprises, to get to that fulfillment of automation potential, they will not only just have to embark on automation journeys, but also successfully scale on those journeys. And in doing so today, they face multiple challenges, as I mentioned. The first one, which you'll see here, is maintaining a healthy pipeline of opportunities. So often, automation programs start with enthusiasm and fanfare, but over the course of time, pipelines dry up, motivation goes down as well. The second one is accessing experienced resources. Dedicated automation resources with the right skill sets are very hard to find. They tend to be in demand, and so it's often difficult to retain them, even if you end up finding them in the first place. Finally, there is change management. This needs to be thought through in order to navigate resistance to new technologies. Now, in addressing these challenges, the citizen-led model, which is of course central to our discussion today, the citizen-led model of automation really can play a huge role. Today most automation programs are run in what we call the traditional way, that is, by dedicated automation talent, often centrally managed and run. What a citizen-led model promises is much more involvement of business resources, a much more democratized process of automation, and a federation of responsibilities. Of course, each approach brings its own challenges and benefits, and hence what we are advocating for is not one over the other, but rather a combination of the two for maximum effectiveness. All right, so what exactly is citizen-led automation? So in essence, citizen-led automation enables participation of business resources or regular non-automation employees of an organization across most, if not all, stages of the automation process. So you could have employees contributing to, let's say, the pipeline or discovery of automation opportunities in terms of ideas. You could have citizen developers, building automation or doing some bit of coding or helping out with that. You could have employees involved with change management and so on. So, across the life cycle of automation itself, you can have business resources involved at multiple stages. Now, by no means is this a brand new concept, and in some ways the demand has always been there. But what has changed in the recent past is some of these supply side dynamics. For instance, now you have low code and no code tools that enable business users to build automation without having to have a deep technical background. Having said that, it's not all a bed of roses. Of course, you still need some guardrails in place, but the concept itself is fairly empowering. Similarly, you have examples of organizations with successful crowdsourcing programs for idea generation and filling the automation pipeline. So all of these dynamics, combined with the post-pandemic urgency for automation and the shortage of skilled, dedicated automation resources, means that the time for citizen-led model has truly arrived. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the traditional model tends to be more top-down with dedicated technical resources, workshop-based idea generation, and so on. Whereas the citizen-led model envisions democratization by having decentralized automation resources, greater participation from across the organization, and in doing so tends to make change management easier as well. Since a lot of the folks who are actually impacted by automation in terms of their day-to-day processes may very well end up contributing to that automation either through ideation or by development and so on, right? Okay. So in our research, we have found that there's a wide spectrum of enablement for the citizen-led model. But enterprises today typically fall into three major buckets. On one end of the spectrum, we have the opportunistic adopters who typically employ the citizen model only for the discovery of processes to automate. And then, in the middle, we have those who, in addition to use or having employees contribute to the discovery phase, they also build attended automations in order to automate some of their day-to-day activities or tasks. And finally, we have programmatic adopters who, apart from what I already mentioned, are going that extra mile to ensure that citizen developers are involved in unattended automation as well, and therefore are able to leave their imprint on a larger organizational landscape. So programmatic adopters tend to be limited in terms of sheer numbers today, but the benefits they are able to generate are increasingly starting to validate the idea of the citizen model. Okay, so now that we know enterprises can benefit from a citizen program to ensure faster automation at scale, let's look at some of the levers need to enable this. First and foremost, one of the most powerful levers we have seen is the structure of the Center of Excellence, or COE. So in examples of successful citizen automation, we have seen that the COE is typically organized in a federated manner. That is a hub and spoke COE model, where responsibility for automation, including targets, the development activity and so on, is devolved to the spokes. And these spokes are functionally located within business units. The spoke in this case is closer to the business unit employees. They can provide guidance, recruit and train citizen developers, and manage change much more effectively. The hub then becomes responsible for maintaining standards and executing multifunctional projects that have more org-wide implications. So simply organizing and enabling a COE in a more federated fashion can make the citizen model much more effective. Apart from the COE structure, there are several other steps that organizations can take to enable the citizen-led model to its fullest extent. For instance, we see enterprises build rewards and recognition mechanisms. This can, again, vary from anything like a cash award for, let's say, most promising ideas in terms of the discovery of automation, to internal hackathons and recognition based on those. Of course, trainings and education constitute a key lever in enabling the citizen model as well. We observe a variety of trainings are typically needed for different kinds of participants. We have general awareness trainings, which are pretty much org-wide or applicable org-wide. And then you may have specialized trainings, for example, for citizen developers who want to up their game and ensure that they understand the whole software development paradigm. Finally, the old adage of you can't improve what you don't measure applies here as well. Organizations that have moved the needle with the citizen model inevitably measure and continuously improve various aspects of the program, starting with metrics measuring participation in idea generation, for instance, to those that track citizen development contribution and outcomes as well. Okay, so to summarize, we are getting into a period of time where the demand and need for automation is justifiably at an all-time high. The benefits are clearly understood, and the pandemic has brought about a sense of urgency. So addressing this demand while navigating some of the challenges will require a combination of different models, including the traditional one and the citizen-led one. The citizen-led thus far has been less prevalent, but the availability of new tools and demonstrated success stories just go to show that the time for enabling this model has well and truly arrived. So if you haven't started on your journey with the citizen model, I would definitely encourage all of you to dip your toes. And with that, I come to the end of my time. Do feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Our contact information is on the screen. Thank you, and over to you, Sid.
Thank you, Anil. Fantastic. I think a great perspective. In fact, when you were talking about certain elements within that, I was continuously going back to my daily journeys as somebody who is trying to drive some of these citizen-led models and trying to understand the challenges within that. See, the paradox that you highlighted is fantastic, right? That there is massive demand and there is a shortage of supply of talent. Now that is all the business leaders would perhaps say that is the best problem to have. But there are solves that we need to also kind of create, and I think we'll dive deeper into the panel discussion, Anil. So really enjoyed this, and thank you so much. And now with this team, we would actually dive into Microsoft's perspective, and we have Ashwini also with us. Ashwini, I'll request you to please give a quick introduction, and then we take up the presentation. And just before that, Ashwini, to our audience, you can also please type in your questions in the window, And we will keep getting your questions. We are applying some filters and we will take some of the questions towards the end of the webinar. Over to you, Ashwini.
You said, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, perfect, great. So thank you for this opportunity. It's great to be here. My name is Ashwini. I'm a group program manager on the Power Automate team as part of Microsoft, the product team. And I thought we'd go through just a perspective, a mental model of how we are seeing this space evolve, building on what Anil mentioned has covered so far already. So the first of all, the most exciting thing, the reason I get so excited about automation in the morning is because of this mission, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more through automation. This is really an energizing mission for us on the team and as a company as well. You can see how it relates to the overall mission from Microsoft, and as well as the age of automation that we are now in. It is just such a great time to be in this automation space itself. And just to take a step back and see what's happening around us, I thought I picked out 4 metrics just to get us aware of the different waves that are happening around us. Each individual wave by itself is disruptive, but together, when all of them are coming in at the same time, it's just fundamental shift in how organizations, how people are able to just think through what is the role of automation in this whole space. So the first one is wave 1 is a changing workforce. And this, I always, I've been around for a while. I knew millennials were coming into the workforce, but this fact that the super majority, 75% of the workforce will be millennials by 2025, right? You just snap your fingers and 2025 will be here. And really, what does that mean from an enterprise expectation perspective? These are digitally native folks that have grown up with modern experience, at least the internet, and email and mobile devices, and their tolerance for what we are okay with from a green screen applications or from just legacy systems is not very high. They just want to move, they want to impact, they want to drive, they want to be effective as quickly as possible. So that is going to be the majority of the workforce in just a few years with different expectations than what we have. The second one is the digital demand, which Anil covered and Sid highlighted as well. And in fact, the data point, there are many data points around it. The one I love is this: half of digital work activities can be automated with current technologies. There's a lot of talk about AI and intelligence and new GPT-3 or new models being built for just unlocking even more potential. But just right now, half of it can be automated. Half of what people are doing can be automated with current technology, which is just a massive opportunity for all of us to cultivate. Now, the third one is, Anil also covered this, which is traditionally our response has been professional skills and professional developers go solve, and there is rigor that's involved. There is professionalism that comes from change management, from knowing how to scale, from knowing how to manage security and governance. There's just a lot of depth that's required for developers to be efficient, but there just isn't enough of them. There's, at least in the US, 1 million developer shortfall. And this is primarily coming from non-technology companies, because in this day and age, every company is a digital company. So, there's, and then finally, the great lockdown, and Anil also talked about this, and this was, it just laid bare how organic and how ad hoc our businesses run through these just human interactions that we do that just don't scale to the speed and the constraints we've now put on when we're working from home, when everything has to be very measured and you have to be on Teams calls or on Zoom calls, and just getting work is much slower without automation as a result. So all four of these, if you combine them together, it's just highlighting an opportunity for us to recognize there is a fundamental shift happening in the automation space and in organizations. And then, as Microsoft, then we say, okay, what is our role in this shift, and how do we make sure we're able to deliver what customers want from us? So we believe low code is a fundamental shift in technology. Anil also covered this, which is the emergence of low code tools. And it empowers everyone to go faster. It's not just about citizen developers, although yes, that absolutely enables citizen developers, but these experiences must scale to pro developers as well, must scale to IT administrators and data scientists as well, and everyone that is able to bring their unique aspect to help move the organization forward. So if I'm a business developer or a citizen developer, I should be able to automate on my own. If I'm a pro developer and I know exactly how to automate a legacy system or how to invoke my ERP system, I want to be able to encode all that and make it available to others so that they can self-service themselves as well. If I'm an IT administrator, I know how to work with data. I know how to govern at scale. I should be able to plug those skills into this overall automation fabric for the enterprise as well. So we really think of automation as the operating system for the enterprise because it is what enables everyone in the organization to move forward faster, to have better speed, better customer experiences, and just higher satisfaction for employees. So that's a core belief we have, is in order to meet the evolving needs from the workforce, with the gap that developers have, the need for automation and the application of automation, low code really empowers this next level of adoption. Now, the other, just again, the mental model, one more slide on mental model, then I'll talk about what our offering really is. Another mental model we have is, as the industry, we shifted, the introduction of PCs, the introduction of Office, shifted the expectation of what information workers were expected to do. And we think we're right at the cusp of another shift in expectations. So when Office came in with Excel, there's a census survey, at least for one of the European countries, that asks, hey, are you familiar with spreadsheets? Right? This is a census question asking people if they're familiar with spreadsheets, because it measures the sophistication of a population and how skilled is your population. We believe that the next level of information workers will need to be able to do lightweight automation by themselves. It will just be a fundamental expectation of how you can be an effective part of the organization by you being able to automate on your own. And this cannot be by writing code. It just can't. It doesn't scale. It has to be an and. Yes, you will also have people that are able to bring that rigor and bring that sophistication to write code, but it cannot be locked up inside 10, 20% of your organization. Yep. So this is just another mental model of how we see the evolution of organizations with regards to automation. So in that light, really, what is Power Automate for those not as familiar with? And I know this is a busy slide, but I'll take a couple of minutes to walk through it. The first one, really, Microsoft is a cloud company, and we believe that cloud fundamentally enables a great experience to get started and to scale across the world, right, at planet scale. So yes, we do offer the heart of our offering is a cloud-based service. And we think that automation needs to span all the different nuances, all the different variants, whether it's RPA or digital process automation or process mining or intelligent automation. All of that should be available as part of a comprehensive cloud-based offering that's easy to get started, easy to build your automation and deploy that's at scale. The experiences need to scale, right? Back to our original point about this is for empower every organization, every person on the planet. So we need to be able to, and we hold our teams very dearly accountable for making sure they're building experiences that scale from citizen developers all the way to enterprise centers of excellence that have professional developers that are able to use DevOps integration or CI/CD pipelines, or just the rigor that comes along with coding as well. So the same platform needs to be able to scale to them. The second one is on the pricing itself. The only way you can enable the world to use automation is to deliver tools that the world can adopt from a pricing perspective and from an experience perspective. So a couple of months back at the Ignite conference in March, we announced for any Windows 10 user, the ability to do individual automation to Power Automate Desktop comes at no additional cost, right? Because it just goes back to the mission we started from. This is what we are about. We are about enabling the world to move forward faster. And price cannot be a stumbling block, just a blocker in that. So now disruptive paid model enables a wider adoption where enterprises can choose, how much can where am I satisfied with individual use? How much do I want to pay for licenses and pull in the governance model or the sharing or the collaboration model, and that's what I'm paying for. But really, when you dig into the pricing model also, what you'll see is the niche vendors or the niche pricing model that has been established in the RPA market is evolving as well. So we're used to customers asking us for, hey, what is the design time experience? And does that cost more? Or something like a platform fee, does that cost more? Or orchestration, does that cost more? No, the only way you can scale to the enterprises at large is to have simplified pricing that provides out of the box, either it's free or it's simple, and you can just get you can get all this functionality in simple licenses. So we believe the simplicity is necessary for us to scale. With the cloud, we also hear back from customers that is in fact faster to build, it is cheaper to run, and cheaper to maintain as well. The third one is around going back to this notion of niche vendors. And in fact, the RPA space is very frothy. There are a lot of vendors in this market and a lot of new people coming up with innovation as well. And as the enterprise decides what the automation foundation is for their organization, a lot of them are making decisions based on, well, is this vendor, do I trust this vendor? Are they going to be around? Do they really understand what it means to scale, right? Because it's not just in a corner in an office of 10 people, I'm going to optimize. This is 10,000 people we're now talking about. And does the organization get what does it mean to integrate with the management tools and practices I already use for managing my 10,000 employees? Does the offering fit into and integrate with those offerings? Because I don't want to have now yet another thing I need to go optimize around and build processes and roles around, and I want to just seamlessly have it integrate. So we see a lot of customers that we are working with, just they want to reduce the number of vendors they're working with, or they want to align with more enterprise vendors that really understand what does it take to be enterprise ready with the security and administration and the guardrails that Anil talked about, right? Governance at scale is one thing to make the tool be available to everyone. There's quite another to make sure it's done responsibly. So you don't have data exfiltration issues, you don't have misuse of assets that you are making available to your organization. And finally, this is probably our biggest aha, which is the fact that automation is not an island. And I've been talking about automation, throughout, but really, what do we mean by automation? It's not just RPA. Yes, that's been around, that's established as a market fit. It extends to, of course, it extends to the modern applications and services that have APIs with digital process automation. Of course, it extends to intelligent automation with embedding AI and intelligent algorithms. Of course, it extends also to process mining and how do you understand the business processes? How do you help automate the business processes quickly, et cetera? But it also, if you go back to the workforce that's changing, well, those people are now used to mobile applications on the devices. Okay, what's the role of automation now in a mobile device if my primary mode of interaction with my technology is through my mobile device? How does automation fit into that? Or from a chatbot experience, right? If I'm on the phone and I want to have interaction with systems, well, there's an air gap today between those chatbots and your legacy systems, and how do you really remove that, integrate that seamlessly? So when we think of automation, you have to think broadly about how do you enable the organization to move forward faster by digitizing a lot of the business process they've done. An example of this is a customer we were working with that brought us in talking about, in fact, they were in India. They brought us in and they were saying, hey, I have this Excel spreadsheets I need to reconcile together. And when we talk about the platform, they looked at what we have is another tool in the platform called Power Apps. And they said, you know what, if I was able to build applications, if it really is so simple to build applications, I don't need to automate to reconcile this Excel spreadsheets because I'm able to solve it a modern way, which unlocks new modalities, new experiences. I can now enter this data on the mobile device wherever I am, instead of going back to my Excel desktop and entering that information into my spreadsheet. So I think that, so thinking broadly about what the automation means, and then the last mile of integration, which is your people, as you think of scaling this throughout your organization, your people are spending most of the time in other experiences, whether it's Office, whether it's Outlook, whether it's Excel, whether it's SharePoint, whether it's OneDrive, whether it's Teams, whether it's Dynamics for those that are using it from an ERP perspective, whether it's Azure for the professional developers that are using it. Their home is these different experiences. And from an automation adoption perspective, we have to make sure this automation reaches directly into those experiences. So it's not just oh, I do something different and then I come back to do my day job. No, your expectation is the modern information worker is doing automation as part of their day-to-day job. It has to be integrated with your experiences. So beyond the Microsoft integrations, we also provide hundreds of connectors, both for actually Microsoft and for third-party customers as well. And this list continues to grow. Every time I present this slide, it has to, the number I keep increasing. I think it's 470 as of this morning. It is important for us to provide out-of-the-box connectors to these modern applications and services that everybody is using now. So hopefully that gave you a good sense of the mental model we're seeing as evolution of the space, that give you a sense of what we are prioritizing and how we're really thinking about what our automation offering should be from Microsoft. And I think it would be great now to hear from Jason and Joy about how we're applying this technology within Microsoft itself to move Microsoft forward as an organization. So Jason, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Ash. And it's great to be with you all today and share a bit of our learnings and experience as we've tried to apply much of what has already been expressed by Ash and Anil around the automation space, specifically, as I mentioned in the early introductions, around how we're thinking about this within cloud marketing and the global demand center at Microsoft. Just one quick slide that introduces how we've thought about some of that journey around hyper automation. And so, as we've covered in many ways already earlier in the call, this major trend around new industry, well, it's been around for a while, but new growth around this industry, rather, where hyper automation, Gartner was saying, hey, in 2020, this was their #1 strategic trend. Now in 2021, they recently released a report that says that this type of automation, it's actually a condition of survival. And when we think specifically about what we've called this webinar, the post-pandemic world or democratization in the post-pandemic world, it is actually the awareness of it and the need for that resilient automation is heightened as a result of the pandemic and now is a condition of survival. And so the way that we've leveraged that, obviously, as Ash has just mentioned, is within Microsoft, we've wanted to build a best-in-class center of excellence around the utilization of Power Platform and all of its offerings to be able to support automation efforts for the global demand center and cloud marketing more broadly. So going down to the bottom left then, as we've talked about now at length in this webinar, setting up a center of excellence has been a critical part and component for us to be able to develop the partnerships, the planning, and as well just the platforms that are needed to support across the organization. We've kind of, actually Joy and I were just speaking during this call, like we're in an interesting way of thinking internally about how centralized are we and how federated are we within that model, and we're sort of a blend between the two, and we'll talk more about that in the next slide, of a bit of how we're organized in that way. But what we've seen was, especially in an organization of our size, the ability to have centralized planning around how our platforms are going to be set up so that within the Microsoft tenants, but then specifically our environments of Power Platform, we have the right governance, security, controls, data loss prevention, and just good visibility across the organization. So the way that we did that was set up some centralized resourcing to support how we were going to think about that for cloud marketing, as well as an executive committee. We'll talk about this in a moment, but this includes folks like Ash and Joy as well, but an executive committee that helps us with some of our planning and prioritization across the company and how we're thinking about efforts within cloud marketing. Lastly, and this is especially as we thought about this for our organization, the Global Demand Center, the key to the Global Demand Center is scale. We wanted to have scaled marketing efforts that do connected sales and marketing to be able to use intelligence to pass off great leads to our sales teams. As we thought about that scale over the course of time, the way that every time we would add a new marketing campaign, every time we would add a new product that we were trying to support within the Global Demand Center, it was causing resource constraints. We would need to add, whether it was onshore, offshore resources, wherever they would be, human effort was continuing to increase, even though many of the tasks that we were executing were similar across those marketing campaigns within our marketing operations space. And so as we started down this journey about a year and a half ago to think about how we can use this type of automation tech to help us, what we recognized was, if we look at the criteria for automation sort of projects, things that are repeatable, that are well documented, that are obviously done by people today, that largely fit much of what our teams were doing that we were spending millions of dollars to be able to support. And we recognized if we can redeploy some of those resources around automation efforts, we would be in a much more scalable position and frankly a much more resilient position. So it was not because of the pandemic that we went down this road, but we were very grateful amidst the pandemic, especially as, obviously in a very heartbreaking way, all across the globe, we found resource constraints for our humans, but we had invested in this automation effort that could continue even though we had resource constraints amidst the pandemic. So what that gave us was a much more resilient model that was able to operate in a much more scalable way. And so with that, Joy and I are going to talk through a next slide here that talks through some of our learnings over the course of this past year, essentially, as we've partnered together on some of these efforts. The first one was, and I've mentioned this already on the last slide, but the creation of this executive committee and how we govern and prioritize our automation initiatives. We found it to be so critically important that as we have a centralized team that can manage the platform, it also requires centralized planning so that we can have everyone marching in the same direction or rowing the boat in the same way, I guess you could say, because otherwise you could have competitive automation efforts. Resourcing was required in every area where we're going to go automate a process. And when we're talking about an organization the size of Microsoft, it was requiring us to be very careful about the way we do our planning and pull together partnerships that included the business stakeholders or business units that were involved, as well as the product group, as well as a lot of our internal IT teams. So we wanted to make sure that this effort was not being done in a silo, but had visibility and frankly the buy-in that was required from our various executive sponsors to be able to really make good progress in our automation efforts. With that, I'll hand it over to Joy for the next point.
Thanks, Jason. So on the second point on partnerships, it's absolutely vital to leverage the work and learnings from one another. As a business operations unit supporting field marketing execution, my team and I actually really partner very, very closely with Jason and his team, who leads the Intelligent Automation COE for Microsoft, as well as through the steering committee that was mentioned. Working with Ashvini and the engineering team really enables us to provide real business feedback to help the product team to help us prioritize some of the enhancements, creatively come up with solutions to ensure that they're hearing real business case scenarios. In my experience, cross-company collaboration and partnerships has proven time and again that we really move with much more agility, and we reduce and avoid issues altogether without having to start from scratch, being able to use modular solutions that are already existing, really learning from Jason and the COE team that has been stood up really increases our benefits, reducing our costs and really speeding up our time to market.
One of the next points as well is that our acceleration and adoption of actual technology and the capabilities that are within the platform. And so as a part of this partnership that we developed, and really it's a lot with Ash and his team, what we've been able to see is because we're utilizing that first party tech and we have that direct partnership, we're able to understand better what are the capabilities that are being released. And as a result, we've been able to accelerate the adoption there. We've learned of things that are coming that we've been able to test and try and learn and understand the features that are being rolled out. And that's helped us in terms of our ability to not only utilize that technology, but then with lots of gratitude to Ash, be able to influence some of those roadmap items as well to be able to have success for the business.
Yeah, and with regards to platform, first of all, any platform we design has to be founded on a couple of key things. Documentation of information, that includes anything from execution processes, access, accessibility, governance, compliance, just to name a few. And of course, the accessibility to and application of information and knowledge through training and skilling. I think that as we've learned, we should be investing a lot of time and resources at the start of standing up any program with these two components. Documentation should never be an afterthought. We've learned that, and we continue to improve what documentation really needs to look like, how the teams need to be able to have access to it, and then really having continual training and skilling for everyone so that we can ensure that there's different levels of knowledge and information so that we can enable a really good center of excellence.
Yeah, that's great. Around the next point, access for everyone opens up an opportunity for skilling. I would also say access for everyone opens up our responsibility to make sure that we're, as Joy has already mentioned, from a knowledge management and documentation perspective, that we're solid there. But then when we think about skilling, we have the opportunity to drive deeper into citizen developer efforts to be able to enable people to do better work. Because at the core of it, as Ash highlighted at the beginning, our goal here is productivity for everyone. And so what we want here is not just these very centralized efforts, but individuals who have the knowledge and training and resources and skill set to be able to help themselves to be more fulfilled and to be more productive in their work. And so what we found from a citizen developer perspective, especially since Microsoft's RPA offering or Power Automate Desktop is available to all Windows 10 users, what that's increased even internally for us is the awareness around the product and its growing capabilities are causing more questions in a good way. Now people have more ideas and they have more opportunities where they can see a vision for themselves where this manual task that they do today could be something that's automated. That's a very good thing. And for a center of excellence, also increases the responsibility to make skilling efforts and training efforts available at a very rapidly increasing pace, because people have ideas all the time for those things, and they are the closest to that element of work. So we need to increase the amount of skilling there. What we've done even internally is create this notion for this summer of something that we were referring to as Power Platform Summer School, where we're encouraging all the people who have access to our platforms to go through some standard training to continue to up-level the understanding of how they utilize Power Platform itself. Lastly, just in terms of governance, controls, and best practices, again, as we use Power Platform, one of the things that we're really benefited by is this notion of the COE toolkit, the Center of Excellence toolkit. And what that provides for us is some centralized monitoring capabilities where you can see at an individual user level the types of capabilities that they're driving in terms of the app development or flows and sequences. As well, you're able to understand the data loss prevention policies that are associated with that, so you can understand risk mitigation. And lastly, you're able to, through that, nurture individuals. So where you can see users who have a more accelerated path because they're creating many apps, or you can see users who have less development, you're able to understand who the individual users are that may be the go-to to be champions because they've got a higher degree of skill set, or maybe they need some help along the journey. And so those sort of citizen developer efforts are really made much more efficient as a result of centralized monitoring and having this notion of a center of excellence.
And the last pillar, so as Anil mentioned, that operations is one of the key areas in any enterprise where automation is going to be very important. So planning is definitely a key component throughout the entire life cycle of being able to deliver automation within an operations business unit like the one that I'm at. We should always be able to review our plans, be agile enough to meet the critical business needs and priorities. And as a part of planning, we have to continually have process assessments and evaluations. it's a first step before we even go down the path of identifying and delivering any automation solutions. We should always look at our current processes and vet them to be as optimal as possible. Like, this is key to really delivering important types of automation. If these processes, really aren't meeting the needs of the business as they stand today, we should take a look at maybe transformations, reinvention of the processes, because we don't want to automate something that isn't really meeting the business needs. And so lastly, I'd say that, in our process assessments, we should also then perform cost benefit analysis, measure what it is that we're trying to achieve with the automation, because, ultimately we want to be able to provide a healthy return on what automation solutions that we do implement before we commit to delivering them.
I'll address the last 2 points together then. First off, automation can be a blocking function or an accelerating function. And really that comes to the last point, which is about our careful planning. If we put our efforts into automation too quickly without having thought through all the implications of where we're going, it can actually slow down the efforts. What we need is to be able to look at it, whether it's an individual process or the way that we construct the organization around it. There has to be careful thought into how you want to engineer, whether from a technical perspective or just process engineer the work that is being done, so that you make sure you do it right from the start and not block yourself down the road. You can quickly run into automating a process in such a way that can cause very significant technical debt. And while it seemed like a good idea at the start to automate because it was going to produce efficiencies, in the long run, it actually can create some more complexity. And so what I would say is the speed of efforts going, especially in the early stages of an automation process, in that process design and solution design sort of phase, it should not be underestimated that the diligence that's required there is very important in terms of the long-term success of that project. With that, that's the content that we had from a Microsoft perspective. Sid, I'll hand that back to you. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you, Jason, Joy, and Ashwini. This was very inspiring, and in the sense that the interlocks that we observe between the COE, the product team, and the execution team at Microsoft, I think that is very, very inspiring for a model that can be successful for a lot of organizations. And I think I learned a lot. And I did also observe within Ashwini's presentation, the hiring paradigm has to also change now. People have to, talk about automation in the same breath as Excel. And organizations like ours also, while we are hiring resources, we are actually now getting into that space that, hey, automation is hygiene now, and it has to be looked upon like that. So thank you so much again for your presentations. And now we'll get into, what we are seeing on the ground at HCL, and I'll quickly kind of give the audience a flavor of this. A lot of this got covered incidentally from a perspective of what Anil shared and what the Microsoft team has shared. But look at it like this: the demand is greater than the supply. And that's what we are also observing. And from a supply point of view, I mean the supply of resources, the supply of just the folks who can actually do the assessments for automation. So those are the kind of things that we are seeing from a perspective of the demand for automation. Suddenly there is a massive spurt, and that's what a lot of my team keeps very busy in trying to create some of those solutions to be able to address the growing demand in that space. And then we are also having conversations with customers where automation becoming a necessity is something that we are being told continuously. And this is a shift because, see, until 2 years ago, there was concept selling involved in automation. And today it is not about concept selling, it is about scale. To the point I think, Ashwini, you also made in your presentation. How can we scale automation? What is the scale you can achieve with automation, right? And therefore, the ROI point and the business impact of it that Joy, you mentioned, I think those are elements that we are continuously getting asked about. Those are elements that we're continuously working towards when we are delivering automation to our clients. And with that, Rachit is actually capturing a lot of voice of our customers. And Rachit, I'd love for you to come in on this. What are you observing on the voice of customers, and how are we going about on the operations side, building a citizen developer model at HCL?
Sure, Sid, thank you. And I think the team covered, Ashwini, you covered, Anil, you covered on how customers are talking about automation. So For some of our larger customers, we're not proposing to build 2 projects on automation or RPA. We're not saying we'll do 5 projects for RPA. We're saying we'll build the automation COE for you, right? So we'll look at it holistically, that some of the questions can be answered by an RPA, but some of the questions may need Power Apps. Some of those may need some built-on API connections. Some of them may need some niche technologies or newer startups to work with, right? So it's a more holistic approach rather than just deploying RPA for business process services. This is one big shift we're seeing. And secondly, I think we've all covered that it's now the velocity is at a scale where the demand is much more than supply. So working through citizen developers, we realize is needed or need of the hour for organizations like us, right? So what we're doing interesting, or what has worked for us, is we're doing some immersion trainings for our teams on automation, right? So immersion trainings on people who can build flows, people who can sniff opportunities, people who can visualize how the impact will look like. So some great gamification tools that we build for how they can visualize the impact of automation. I'll also give an example of Bodathon we did in recently. So for 2 of our most strategic customers with 8,000 people and 6,000 people respectively, we ran Bodathon for them. So what we did was, I'll give you an example for the customer where we have 8,000 people. So across all those people, we ran Bodathon. We promoted that people come out with ideas on ways to improve business process services. We got about 1,000 ideas, and that was the level of interest that we had across the account. The top 20 who received awards in terms of cash awards, in terms of recognitions. And today, as we speak, all those 20 are being executed, which are overseen by the people who suggested those ideas, not by the automation COE, but the people who actually visualized the end state. So that is the level of citizen developers we're already having across HCL. Over to you, Sid.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachit. And now with the time that we have at hand, we will look at a few questions and we will kind of go about in a panel discussion format. Within those few questions, maybe we'll extend by a few, maybe 10 minutes within the webinar, and we'll go about having a free-flowing conversation with that. Now, my first question, and Joy, this is actually coming to you. From a perspective and having observed your automation journey closely, what is the nature of automation that you see is changing in the past 2 years that you've been at it? So what are the key changes in the business unit that you are actually responsible for?
Sure. So I believe that the areas that were traditionally not in scope for automation are certainly now seeing an increased need for automation. And marketing, the marketing space that I'm in, operations specifically, is a perfect example of a non-traditional area that we're seeing a desire for more automation. And I think there's a lot of drivers that's causing this. Cost pressures being definitely up there, a need to scale up and down. I think some of the things that Anil and Ashwini has described, there's definitely employee turnover, a speed to market, creating more efficiencies within our operations space. And then also just within Microsoft itself, the importance of data security and privacy. That's been a critical component as well within the marketing space, where I think these are becoming even the primary factors in driving some of the automation within marketing. And then additionally, I think as Rachit mentioned, there's so many other technologies that isn't just about RPA that we're using within the marketing space. Chatbots, we have D365, and then even some of the cognitive automation that is being leveraged for natural language processing, text analytics, some machine learning, in the space, really taking some of that complex data and simplifying it to a point that it enables all of us to make decisions really driven by facts. and not perception. So I think that's been really key within the space that I'm in.
Makes a lot of sense, Joy. And we always look at maybe finance and accounting, source to pay kind of processes as usual suspects for automation, but with marketing as a function for automation, those are unique propositions. Those are things that are sometimes industry firsts also. So that was a perspective I wanted the audience to also catch, right? I think these are very palpable changes in the nature of automation that are coming through. Now, Ashwini, your passion towards automation is so infectious. The second question is for you. What do you think is a better approach towards achieving holistic automation, right? Is it a multi-vendor best of breed solution approach, or should organizations look at a single platform, a single integrated solution approach? What do you think is going to be the next wave?
That's a great question, Siddharth. I think it's a question you could do a webcast on all by itself, right? It's so rich, the question itself. At a high level, right, at the variables that as I speak with customers, the variables that pop out. One of them is on the, if I look at business experience and technology, right? I look at on the technology side, what does automation foundation look like for you, and how broad is it? How broad do you need it to be, right? Does it need to include DPA? Does it need to include RPA and AI and just this end-to-end? Does it need to include applications and chatbots and dashboards as well, right? How broadly are you thinking about from an automation perspective?
Right.
And to make sure that the foundation that you set up is one that can grow with you as you evolve. Because every organization is going through an evolution, and it will continue to be the case, right? You have legacy systems, you're modernizing some of them, you're having new data initiatives, you have new mobile initiatives as well. So really from a foundation perspective, how does that fit in? And who's your audience? Who are you targeting? Is it a niche, right? Somewhere in the back office that just wants to do my loans processing. That's what I really need. And that's it. That's a compartmentalized. Or do you really want to seize the opportunity of making automation available to your whole organization? With each combination that you put in, right? I like math, so you end up getting n squared, right? As you think through integration of all these different technologies. And it's just the devil is in the detail with automation. It's security and it's governance, it's admin, it's logging, it's training. It just scales, and every one of these, if you do slightly distinct, then you end up spending a lot of energy on the integration problem itself rather than the automation opportunity that exists for your organization.
Yeah.
So I'd say between the experience and the technology, those are the factors to think about. Usually price also comes in, usually from a business perspective, right? It's just, and then they may well be solutions where you have deep technology vendors, whether it's a BPM or a process mining or an just curated AI models or optimization models that that's critical for your business. And ideally, you have a platform that covers the needs of your whole organization with integration points to these specific domains that you need to go plug in as well. Ideally, that's the best of both worlds, where you're able to get the scale and the empowerment, as well as the depth that you need to be able to not have a completely disparate solution.
Makes sense. Makes sense, Ashwini, and thank you for that. And I have to thank you, in fact, Ashwini, for the single biggest disruption that happened in our business in the last 6 months, which was the Power Automate announcement with the Windows pack, right? And see, for an organization like HCL, it's a massive disruption from that perspective, because a lot of our workforce sometimes is in low-cost locations, and the cost of automation and the technology itself sometimes becomes prohibitive. And with that barrier getting reduced, I think we are seeing a tectonic shift in the way our leaders are looking at automation, right? And I think that I have to thank you for that, because the way Microsoft really kind of caught the bull by the horn and attacked it where it had to be. I think that was fantastic to look at. And Aman, I'd love to bring you in on this one as well. What is your take on platform versus best of breed?
Thanks, Ed. So first of all, I think as the demand for holistic automation is increasing, this question becomes even more important. And in my point of view, there is no one size fits all approach here. There are advantages and disadvantages of both the approaches, and enterprises need to evaluate these in the context of their requirements. Some of the advantages of a multi-vendor best of breed approach include a greater flexibility to match specific requirements, possibility to combine best in class capabilities, lower dependence on a single vendor, and easier substitution of individual components. On the other hand, advantages of a single platform include smoother implementation and integration, easier user training, unified user experience across the different components, and easier vendor management. Over to you, Sid.
Yep, makes sense. A distinct approach towards the same thing. Absolutely. Now, maybe the final question of the day, and this is to Jason. Jason, with the advent of citizen developers, and we heard about the guardrails, we heard about how should we actually maintain governance around it. Actually, some of the questions that are flowing in from the audience are exactly that, that how does an enterprise ensure, one, the quality of the output from citizen developers, and second, just making sure that we are actually sticking to the business problem at hand, right? What is your take on it, Jason?
That's a great question. When we think about it internally, we've looked at the notion previously that I mentioned around this idea of the COE toolkit and something we're referring to as like innovation backlog. What we're looking at is there will be a plethora of ideas that can come forward for automation at any point in time. What we want to look at is not automating every process, but the best processes that are going to produce the best sort of results. And so part of the education that has to happen to stakeholders around, especially within a citizen dev model, is not only around the technology and having the understanding of how to use it and how to develop the specific automations, but also around the criteria that set up those automations for success. And so we've put a lot of effort and energy into helping people understand what is the methodology and the process that we take people through to be able to perform those automations. Because the development skill set, even at low code, very different than just the understanding of business process and how we should think about those automations. So making sure that stakeholders within this kind of citizen dev model understand not just the cool factor of being able to go into the platform and perform that sort of automation, but also understand what does it look like, as we mentioned before, to have a process that is repeatable, that is something that is really well documented so you can understand it for other stakeholders as well. And it's something that is a more scalable sort of notion to it. So we've thought about that in the implementation of this notion of the COE toolkit and how we've managed that. And it comes from so really, I would call it like three different areas. There's the skilling element of how do we ensure that people understand both technically and methodology wise how to automate a process. From a community perspective, how do we build a place where citizen developers have a common place where they can talk about the things that they're working on, the way that they're thinking about automating something? As Joy mentioned earlier, one of the real benefits here is modularity. So if something has been automated previously, how can we prevent the need from needing to automate that same process for someone else? And so having some forums for idea sharing and community are really important. And then the third component of that is just the administration element. How do we implement from a COE perspective the platforms that support citizen development efforts without letting it go off the rails in terms of just people can do everything, but having a place where people can do within a centralized way with understanding and being able to report and read out. We think that Power Platform and the COE toolkit allows a lot of that capability and leverage and commend that to others.
Fantastic. And in fact, that's a great point, Jason, because what you are saying is, yes, it is becoming a federated model with citizen development, but the importance of the COE actually becomes even greater when we are going into a citizen developer mode, right? Which is otherwise counterintuitive, right? But those are guardrails I think that we need to be very aware of and dive into that space. Now, with that, I have reached to the end of the questions. And I just have a joke to end this with. I was actually speaking with my dad, and I was talking about what we are going to discuss today. And I told him we are going to talk about democratization of automation. And he said, can you tell me one skill that has been globally the most democratized skill because of the pandemic? and I could not answer it, so I'll give you the answer. The answer is hair cutting skills. It has got truly democratized. So yeah, so on that note, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I think we should do maybe 2 hours the next time a motion picture is in order. And thank you so much to my friends from Everest, from Microsoft, and my team at HCL for putting this together. And to all the audience, very, very glad that you joined in. We would be posting the video and recording of the session on YouTube for your future consumption. And the questions that we could not take up today, we would definitely try to pen them down and send them over to you. Thank you so much. With that, we wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.